It seems like a new mystery has popped up in Fallout 76. A week or so ago, I posted a video looking at some mysterious new additions to Fallout 76 with the Wastelanders update. And in this video, I want to show what is actually a massive continuation of one of those mysterious new additions and how major discoveries have been made around this, such that this may be a suggestion as to what is to come in a future DLC, and it's really exciting. A lot of the work as far as uncovering what exactly is going on here has been a joint community effort, taking place predominantly in one Discord, which I will have linked down below. But in this video, I want to explain to you where we are thus far with this mystery, how it could potentially be a teaser and what it could be a teaser for, and get you more or less up to speed. So if you want to help or continue the search, you can definitely do so. And with this video in particular, I do encourage you guys to watch it most of the way through. I'm going to explain some things, but some things do require clarification, which I could only give, of course, after I explain the mystery first. As for a few of these discoveries or connections, there is an important asterisk there next to them. But to not waste any more time, what exactly is this mystery? With the Wastelanders update to Fallout 76, on the southern side of the map, we do find very interesting and mysterious new guidestones. In game, at first glance, it doesn't really seem like there's a ton to them, just a cool new prop that is placed on the world. You can place your camp down here, which is actually a particularly cool camp spot, so I do recommend doing so. And upon closer inspection, it becomes clear that there's some kind of engravings on them, which do vary from side to side. So these guidestones are actually seemingly based off the real-life Georgia guidestones. The Georgia guidestones are basically rules to guide humanity, what humanity should do, which may be relevant later. But otherwise, one of the interesting things around the Fallout 76 version is these guidestones have actually been in the game files since around release. Although they're only just been placed in the game physically, there's actually been a ton of speculation around the textures which were found ages ago. And some of the supporting evidence that has been found in the game actually brings us to Vault-tec University. In Vault-tec University, there is a terminal from Michael Blake. He seemingly was a language professor at Vault-tec University and had discovered the guidestones, as well as something that seems to be totally separate with the Horse Creek petroglyphs. We find entries about the guidestones and also about the Horse Creek petroglyphs. In the past, it seemed like the guidestones were in fact the Horse Creek petroglyphs, but now it definitely seems like these are two totally separate things. They're just similar, and this guy was interested and visited both of them. And more or less, in these terminal entries, we get some speculation from Michael, as well as some of his colleagues, such as a woman named Jacqueline, as to what exactly these guidestones are and what the engravings mean. Michael describes how they don't really match any of the local native petroglyphs or old European runes that can be found, while conversely, Jacqueline thinks that it could be something extraterrestrial, an alien-made symbol. Although one of the very interesting things about these terminal entries is Jacqueline, for one reason or another, is paranoid. They begin trying to translate the inscriptions on these and eventually have a translation key. But for some reason, Jacqueline's paranoid about this key and actually splits it up into 3 pieces. One goes to Michael, one goes to Jacqueline, and one goes to a third party with Curtis Wilson. Curtis Wilson was somebody dispatched to Appalachia by the government in order to investigate the Free States. After a while, he realized that actually it wasn't the Free States that were conspiring, but it was the government that were conspiring. And largely his role here is to investigate several different mysteries from the region. We know he survives the bombs dropping, but sometime after that, his partner is killed, and as a result of that, he goes into hiding. The trace we could find from Curtis Wilson is in the investigator's cabin. He has terminal entries for a variety of things. All of these being around some of the mysteries of Appalachia, which is likely how he became associated with those investigating the guidestones. But it does make you wonder, what exactly did they uncover and why did they feel the need to separate those keys? Although we haven't heard from Curtis Wilson ourselves in game, of course no human NPCs, he does remark how he will return at some point when the time is right, although we'll come back to him and his terminal. Following the implementation of these physical guidestones, quite a bit of speculation was had, and eventually these two Reddit users discovered that if you put them together, they actually seem to connect. This is one possible interpretation of this, but a separate and what is seemingly a more accurate one was done by Xera, where they basically form a rectangular structure, which many have likened to a map. And this is where the speculation really starts to pick up. This wasn't just some random structure, some random stones placed together. There was something deeper here. Some of the early attempts were trying to overlay the map onto the world space of Appalachia. Users were quick to point out that the symbols on this seemed to match the design or look of the interloper that could also be found in game. At the same time with Wastelanders, we got the addition of the mini interloper, another mystery, so perhaps these are connected somehow. Another observation was it looked like those squiggly parts, for lack of a better word, were actually an overlay. Those were applied to these guidestones after the original designs were put in place. But over time, one of the interesting discoveries that was made was these weren't just random symbols. One, you do have a labyrinth. You can find this all over Google and from various mythologies, but even further, many of these seemingly random symbols actually repeated, and certain sequences even repeated, suggesting that there was something even deeper here. And the biggest revelation thus far came when one user by the name of Gears actually discovered a font that was titled Guidestone. And what this font was a variety of symbols with pairing letters that did describe what appeared on these guidestones. So immediately a variety of users went to translate what we saw here, including me, much to the disarray of my brain and eyes because that sucked. But naturally, as these things go, one user stood out above the rest, and that was with the user named Dickenstein. He was one of the first to have a full-on translation and still has one of the best translations out there. So I will have a link to basically everything I talk about, but in particular this down below. A few interesting discoveries were made from this. Firstly, the largest part to feature symbols that did match these translations almost matched the sequence of the alphabet, but it wasn't quite perfect, and even further, there was a distinction between uppercase and lowercase letters, with only 3 lowercase letters appearing with this during the bottom. The translated BL appeared all throughout this. The letter O was not in the font, but this symbol was found after MN in the inscription, so it's assumed this is O, but for some reason it was not included. But one of the most difficult parts of this, and again, huge shout out to Dickenstein as well as several of the other people to translate it, what we originally thought was a map actually had letters all throughout it, or translated letters in some kind of different language. Although this one major section had the same orientation, other parts had varying orientations rotating all around, which could suggest that this is not the proper way to actually piece this all together. But overall, what this revealed was, after applying all the letters to the guidestones and the fact that none of these letters actually formed legible words, it was mostly just gibberish and almost following the order of the alphabet, what seemed far more likely was the next step would be to find the cipher key. Something to actually convert the symbols, now letters, into actual words, like the letter L equaling life. And one additional observation was this wasn't a Zetan language. Those being the aliens in the Fallout language, we've seen their language in the past and it doesn't match what we see here. But this brings us back to Curtis Wilson's terminal and some of those inaccessible entries on there. If you go through the terminal, there are a bunch of things, many of which we can make sense of. One of the early notable ones is Atlas. This seems to correspond to Atlas Observatory. Just outside of Atlas Observatory, you could actually find this little camp, which far more interesting, in the files of Fallout 76, this is referenced to as the Guidestones camp. And it's speculated that this was the camp that Curtis was using when investigating the Atlas Observatory. It's not totally clear what role he played here. There's nothing super suspicious going on with Atlas. They were mostly trying to mess with the weather. But one entry that may hold a clue is Mysterious Signal. In Fallout 76 lore since beta, we knew that something interesting was going on at the National Radio Astronomy Research Center. Effectively, at this location, they were downloading satellite data, a satellite which was collecting data from outer space. Reading through the terminal entries and even some of the notes, it was discovered how, with one of the better data samples they got, something mysterious or disturbing was actually found from that data. We could find from these entries that the staff at this location immediately became uneasy, attitudes changed. The government and company itself started issuing memos reminding people that, hey, this is confidential, you can't share it. And many were put on edge, describing how they didn't suspect this to remain a secret forever, right? And many individuals working here had sudden and seemingly mandatory retirements pop up after this. As you visit the building now, you could find several notes that do reassert that, hey, this is confidential and you can't share it, with one of them mentioning how people should know what was found here. Many have taken to believe that Mysterious Signal is referring to this, whatever was found in outer space. And even further, one of the ways this could tie back together is this may have been why Jacqueline was so paranoid earlier on about the Guidestone language key. Curtis, investigating this location, may have described to her what was happening with all of these individuals becoming aware of this powerful but dangerous information, and as a result, Jacqueline became paranoid. And it would tie together, especially if Jacqueline thought the Guidestones were extraterrestrial, which she did state. And this is where things get a little iffy. In this building, you could find a communication terminal, something that was a cut or unused piece of content, at least thus far. Although again, this is something that's old. It's all been here since beta. The only new thing is the actual physical location of the guidestones being added. From data mining, we can see at this communication terminal, there was originally going to be a way for us to actually contact aliens. We would have had the ability to send either a hostile or non-hostile message into space. But the biggest revelation from the communication terminal are what was supposed to be some of the entries. In the files of Fallout 76, before one of these entries, we find the listing for to do, translate to alien font. And then there are several things written in English that seemingly should have been translated to a different font. That being long, have, wait, arrive, stars, listen, we are going to come soon, prepare yourself, wait, prepare yourself for destruction of your life by fire when you arrive, life weakens, protect what remains here on Earth. But the most damning part of this in the files of Fallout 76, before each of these sentences, there is a random or seemingly random letter combination. And it seems like what this is the letters that would have translated to those font symbols we found earlier. So take for example here, we do have ACELRX. So seemingly A would have translated to long, C to have, etc. But Bethesda never got to the step of actually converting these letters into these font symbols, at least at the time of this terminal entry. But assuming the alien font is in fact the guidestone font we saw earlier, this would give us a key to the cipher. So if you convert the guidestones to letters, then the letters to words using this key, what you'll find on the guidestones is long have, wait, weakens, soon we are going, arrive, coming, you fire, destruction, you life, protect, stars we are going, arrive, coming, remains, prepare yourself, arrive, listen, arrive, coming, earth. Although at least as of right now, this is incomplete. We could only go off what letters are represented here, which is not a full alphabet. And to be frank, that's large in part where things are right now. This, of course, definitely seems like it has some deeper meaning, like something was actually intended with this content. Although one of the very important disclaimers to make, one, a lot of this is really old. The only thing that is actually new with Wastelanders is the guidestones themselves being placed down. All of the terminal entries, data mined content, etc., the random camps you can find, that's all been in the game since release. None of that is new. So perhaps Bethesda had intentions with this, but they've shifted behind the scenes. Maybe we'll get deeper insight in the future, but we're using out-of-date info for actually coming to these conclusions. Even further, the key piece of information around these guidestones is one, data mined information with those data mined terminal entries for the key, but even further, technically there is no direct link between the guidestones and this terminal. In this building where the communication terminal is located, at no point are guidestones mentioned. Users are speculating that the mysterious signal Curtis Wilson is referring to happens to be this signal that they did receive from outer space from a satellite, but that definitely is somewhat of a leap. With this terminal, it's referred to as the alien font, but we don't actually know if this is an alien font. At no point does Bethesda refer to this font in the files of the game as the alien font. Perhaps that was a different font that we never got. As I mentioned before, the Zetan font is different. So what is this? How does it all fit together? We don't really know yet. But to me, I think it would be a massive coincidence if we get these guidestones, the guidestones actually have a font for them in the files, and it ends up being nothing. It seems like it probably is something. It would be a major coincidence to have more content around the mini interloper right at the same time as these guidestones and them just be unrelated. I think this either will tie into aliens or extraterrestrials as is suggested by Jacqueline, which of course Bethesda wrote that lore, and that is directly around the guidestones, then the leap to the alien communication we could find in that communications terminal isn't quite as large, or perhaps the more supernatural cultist side of things, with the cults of the Mothman, Interloper, and the mystery around all of that. But the one thing that really sells me, convinces me that all of this is something and not nothing. What we're doing as the player right now is taking these guidestones, putting them into a more legible form, converting these symbols to English letters, then converting the English letters to words to get something, the actual message. The only piece of lore we have around the guidestones, the only thing in game right now that talks about guidestones is a terminal entry describing a guidestone translation key, aka basically what we just did. It would be a massive coincidence if that one piece of lore just happens to be what the players are also doing behind the scenes right now. And to me, it seems like that is more than a coincidence, it's actually what's intended. But instead, in the future of having to rely on data mines and circumstantial evidence, we'll have something more concrete, a better quest or event to explain all of this. Again, the search is ongoing. I will have a link to the Discord down below. On the horizon of Fallout 76, we do have a treasure hunter event that we just never got an explanation of. Perhaps this is connected. It still is a ways away, so it could be a little while before we find out more, but in the near future, the PTS is returning for Fallout 76. New updates could bring new content, maybe not in game, but maybe in the form of data mines, so it might not be too far away. Hopefully you guys found this video informative. I'm really excited to see where this all goes, but until next time, I thank you all for watching again. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all later.